Hi and welcome back to Garden Ninja. Today's video guide is going to give you an update on the modern cottage border that I created earlier this year. And I think you'll be amazed at just how fast it's come together and how beautiful it looks. So come on, let's get cracking. If you've not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, hit the red button to subscribe today. Also click the bell for notifications. We'll have access to hundreds of garden design hints, tips and hacks from me, the Garden Ninja. And best of all, it's free. Now the modern cottage garden that I planted earlier this year is looking phenomenal. And if I told you that this border was only planted 2 months ago, would you believe me? I'm not sure I'd believe myself if I hadn't have done it. It's grown really well. All the plants are starting to establish. And what I love about this border is that the plants have really lifted the garden against the house. Because before we had this border, the garden kind of terminated at the wall and finished. And this helps soften it. And as I said in the previous video, often with cottage garden borders, they can be rather complicated, a little bit fussy and high maintenance. However, this modern cottage garden is going to keep its structure throughout the year because I've introduced some evergreen shapes in the form of these standard trees. We've also got a mix of grasses that will extend the season. Let's take a look at some of the winners in this border. Now, one of the big winners in this border has been the roses, and I've picked about 6 different varieties, one of which I've used twice to help bring some repetition. But these beauties have really added a colour pop to this border. Now, they're all old or traditional roses that have sort of single flowers and loads of pollen for my bees, but they've really helped bring together this cottage garden border. Another plant that has given incredible cover in just 2 months is this. It's a Panacea, Cassium's Choice. Now, I've got Panacea in the other parts of the garden. You'll often see them listed with common names such as bunny tails because of these seed heads here that look a bit like a rabbit's tail. Now, this is a great mid-level plant, so it fills in the gap between things like the geraniums and the standard and the roses, and it helps soften the border. And because grasses are relatively see-through, it helps you see through the border to the back, so it doesn't clump up and form a blob. It gives you this sort of airy appearance. Now, I've repeated this Panacea, and we've got it about 5 or 6 times along the border. In fact, there's one behind us here to help give that repetition. And if you want some help with how to design flower beds and garden borders, make sure you check out my How to Design a Flower Bed, because it will show you about repetition, heights and this matrix planting structure that I use. But this is a real winner of a plant specimen. So one plant that's done incredibly well in the garden is this, Verbena bonariensis, and you often see it in show gardens because it brings instant height to a border without shade or taking up too much bulk. And it works really well in this cottage garden border because it brings height that connects the roses to the lower herbaceous perennials. Now, my bees have absolutely loved these this year. Every day I come out and I notice them flying around gathering nectar. The other beauty of Verbena is it's a late summer flowering perennial. And what it does is it helps connect the different spaces in the garden. Now, if you've watched the first video, you'll know I planted these 2 months ago as little plug plants. They were this high, but just look at how much growth they've put on in a season. Now, I will leave these throughout the winter and they'll crisp up and turn a brown colour, but they just hold the garden together in the winter because they add that structure. If you don't want that, you can cut them down once they've finished flowering, but they come back year after year and will self-seed everywhere. And I've already noticed a few dotted around. So this really is a plant that gives you a huge amount for your money. Talking of Verbena, take a look down here. We've got another species of Verbena which is related, called Verbena rigida. Now this is a much more compact form. It only grows to about 50 or 60 centimetres, and you get like a much brighter blast of purple compared to the Verbena bonariensis. But what's really interesting is that I'm using two different species of the same genus. So the genus is Verbena, and then the species is either bonariensis or rigida. And by using two different forms of the same plant, it brings repetition but also intrigue to the garden. And you can do this with nearly any plant species. By taking the main genus and picking different species or cultivars, you can help link plants together because they will all have similar characteristics. With Verbena, it's these tall, slender stems followed by these little clusters of purple flowers. So by using different forms and different species, you can help connect the border, and I think it works really well here. Now another plant that is conserving itself ready for next year are the peonies. They've put on loads of leafy growth, but I only had 1 or 2 flowers. But that's not concerning me this year because these are relatively young plants, and given the next couple of years they're going to bulk up and fill this entire area, which is why we've got this void of soil with not much planted, because I'm preparing for the ultimate height and growth. And in that first video I was telling you that you should plan your flower beds for the ultimate height rather than cramming in plants for what looks good now. As you can see, there's still quite a bit of space. Other things are filling out, but come next year and the year after, I can guarantee that this will be a really sizable specimen. Now there are some other plants that are a bit slower to take, and believe it or not, things like the geraniums and some of the geums have been quite slow. But the beauty of things like geraniums and geums and ground cover is they will often spend a lot of effort in year one putting on that rootstock before bursting into life next year. So when we look down here, we've got the small geraniums, small geums, and they're still only about this big, and that's because they're putting on that rootstock. But I bought them as plug plants, meaning they were far cheaper than buying 2-litre plants. So I would always urge a bit of patience and using your budgeting skills whenever you're taking on a job like this, because it would have easily cost me 4 or 5 times the amount to buy the same plants but in 2 or 5-litre pots. I'm a patient soul, and by putting them in as little P9s or plug plants, it's less watering and better for your pocket. Another consideration with any new border is weeds, the gardener's worst enemy. However, I found this border rather easy to look after. So I've been coming out every couple of weeks with my Japanese weeder and simply running it across the ground wherever there's any weeds. So I can see some there, there's a bit of grass. And just by nipping them in the bud, pulling them out early doors, you can save yourselves loads of drama. And again, I find this quite mindful. 10 minutes here and there every few weeks saves me a lot of work rather than leaving them to completely take over. Have you got gardening questions that you need answers for? Well, why not head over to the Garden Ninja forum on my blog, where you can ask me anything about gardens, plants and garden design. There's a whole army of other garden ninjas there that can help provide answers to your questions. It's a really great way to meet the other ninjas, so head over there now. And there we have it, an update on the modern cottage garden border. And I think for 2 months it's coming along really well, but the proof is in the pudding for next year. All of this hard work is getting the border ready for next spring, when it's going to burst into life and hopefully be this rich, full tapestry of herbaceous perennials, trees, roses and grasses, and it's going to look even more gorgeous than it does right now. If you've liked this video, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking the link below and hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you also check out my Instagram page and other social media accounts to see more behind the scenes with me, Lee Burkhill, the Garden Ninja. Happy gardening.